moment?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'll find out. But if you guys just make sure you've got your mobiles turned on full silent, it would be great. And I'll get Dan up on stage. If you're welcome Dan up on stage, please.
Yay.
Great, thanks Adrian. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. How's your day today? Hot? Yeah? Good. As Adrian mentioned, my name's Daniel. I've got a background in paediatric nuclear medicine. I work at the Children's Hospital. I really enjoy what I do, and that's kind of great because 6 months before I actually started the course, I had no idea what it was. It sounded good, nuclear medicine, but I think the reason that won me over was it was 5 minutes from my house. So I don't know how you chose your career and how you ended up doing what you're doing, but I didn't kind of grow up thinking, my whole life I want to be this or that, like some people do, and that's great. But I wasn't like that. I did know though what I wanted to do in the end was just basically have opportunities. I didn't want to be capped by a title or just be limited to an occupation or a career. I wanted to have options, and so from an early age, we're always hardworking. I'd met Patricia when we were at school, so I kind of always knew that she was going to keep me, and that's what she did. And we would sit there discussing, before any form of commitment, like, hey Pat, it's great, you should do teaching because one day you could look after the kids in the school holidays. So that's how we chose our careers. It wasn't like it was rocket science, so to speak. So we were kind of like going through that whole process, working hard. I always knew I wanted to get into property. It's just kind of like the influence around me. So we always worked hard from an early age, had multiple jobs all the time, and even after I started working in the hospital, I still worked at Woolies. If anyone ever had a job at Woolies, I used to work in a deli, so you don't want to give up a job like that too quickly. There's a lot of fringe benefits attached to a job like that. If you've worked in that industry, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So, we always worked hard, started investing in property, kind of like climbed the whole, not corporate ladder, because, I'm in the health industry or the sickness industry, if that's how you want to put it. But it's like a value add industry. Like, I'm there to help people. You're not there to make money. If your doctor's there to make money, then I highly suggest you probably find another doctor, one that's going to be interested in you and your health and everything that's happening in your life as a whole, as opposed to how much they can make from the medicines they're going to shove down your throat. But anyway, so that's kind of a little bit about me. We've got 2 little boys, Anthony and Christian, who are kind of not so little anymore. They're little boys but very big. You get my drift. So they're growing, definitely well fed, and hopefully they'll take after Patricia's side and they're all tall. But I suppose what I want to kind of share with you, we get an opportunity to kind of talk about different aspects as to what we do, what we've done, where we've been, our experiences, etc. And what I want to share with you tonight is kind of something that I read in a book, and I think it's really important, because if you look at anything that you've ever done in your life, any kind of aspect that's brought you to where you are right now, it's come down to those daily deliberate habits that you've developed. And that's why I kind of talk about having all these jobs and, meeting my wife young and blah, 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 because there were choices that I could have made along that way that would have developed habits that would not have resulted in the kind of lifestyle we have now. Because it would have been very easy to say, I'm studying, I don't want to work. It's very easy to say, I've got a job now, I don't want to have a second job or a third job. It would have been very easy to fall into habits of just waking up late on the weekend, sleeping in, just not doing, not saving, not investing, do you know what I mean? They're all habits. All these things are different habits. It takes emotional intelligence, which we can reserve for another talk, but it takes kind of like a mindset to develop that concept in your mind that you're going to do something that's uncomfortable for a short period of time until it becomes comfortable. Does that make sense? And then once it becomes comfortable, to continue to do it until that activity or that action becomes a daily deliberate action, which becomes a habit. And there's all this talk about it takes 30 days, 90 days to develop a habit, but it's kind of one of those things where if you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because how many people do you know that don't save? How many people do you know that don't take jobs because it's not exactly what they want? So they'd rather be unemployed than work. How many people do you know that say, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z additional courses above and beyond what I'm doing now to get a pay rise or to advance my career, but they don't because they don't develop that habit of going back to school and studying, of putting money aside, whenever they get paid, of, taking small steps that are not comfortable, because none of these are comfortable when you're first doing them. Would you agree with that? Okay, so this book, I'll get to in a sec, but I want to talk about, it's the next slide, there it is. I want to talk about these three images just for a sec, because it'll kind of set the scene for you. The first one is roast lamb. Now, a mother would watch her, like a mother, she has a child, so she's got a daughter, would watch her mother cook a roast lamb, and what she would do is she would cut the end of the lamb off, put it in a tray, and then bake it. And so the mother, she would do the same thing. And one day her daughter asks her, I see Nana does this and you do it as well. Why do you cut that end of the lamb off? And the mother says, yeah, because my mother would do it like that all the time. And so the daughter wants to know why, because she's not understanding. So she goes and asks the grandmother, why do you cut the end of the lamb off? And the grandmother said, well, because I only have a tray that's this big that fits in my oven, and the lamb's too big, so I cut the end off. And that's why I do it. But the daughter, like the mother, the grandmother, the mother and the daughter, the mother never asked. She just did whatever her mother did because that's just what she did. Do you know what I mean? So she developed a habit but not knowing why. Tin cans. There was a child was asked to bring the cans up from the basement. He watched his mother tip the can over and open it from the bottom. And so he asked, why do you open it from the bottom? And she said, because my mother opens it from the bottom. I don't know why. Just that's how it is. Again, so he goes and asks his grandmother, why do you open the can from the bottom? And the grandmother says, well, because in the basement where I store everything, all the dust collects on the top. So save me time. Instead of washing it, I'll just tip it upside down and open it from the bottom. Again, another habit that people develop, but other people duplicate it and don't know why. The apprentice. One day an apprentice was left to kind of do a small job, gets electrocuted, ends up in hospital. And his boss comes up to him and says, mate, what happened? Why don't you shut the power off before you went and slit the wires? And he said, I was trying to save time. I always see how you stand on a ladder and then put one leg on the ground and then you let go of it and then you splice, blah, blah, blah. And he said, yeah, but son, I have a wooden leg. That's why I didn't get electrocuted. So it's just that whole thing. People develop habits. Some are good, some are bad. They don't know why, but they kind of develop like this. So ask yourself this question. You are where you are today. Is that because of decisions you made that are based on habits like this? Maybe financially you're not where you want to be. Where did you develop those habits from? Maybe financially you're doing really well. Where did you get those habits from? Who taught you? Who were you duplicating? Because at the end of the day, the reason why I love an environment like this so much is because it's all about leverage. Leverage is getting 100 times the result for the same amount of effort. The habit of coming to a room like this on a weekly basis so you can develop a personal network, grow that network, develop relationships with other people that are going to aid you in terms of transactions or business you want to develop in the future or whatever it is, or just develop those connections you may lean on in the future, comes from the action of deliberately coming on a weekly basis to develop those connections, to deliberately invite and bring people along to an environment where you can meet them and socialize with them and get to know them, to grow your own personal network. That all comes down to this. So this author, Charles Duhigg, wrote this book about the power of habit and how some habits are formed consciously and subconsciously. Sometimes you develop habits without thinking about it. Anyone ever, maybe in the past gone to the gym regularly, like all the time, like used to go daily, and for some reason you just don't go anymore? Why? What happened? It's all about making a decision once, and then twice, and then 3 times, and then slowly the decision compounded over a period of time, and then the habit developed of not going anymore. So that's an example of a bad habit. Just as you could change that and then make it a good habit by, starting to go again. But he wrote this book about habit and the power of habits, and how habits can make your life a lot easier if you develop the right ones. So I'll give you an example. Mathematically, what's 1 times 1?
1.
Okay. What's 2 times 2? 12 times 12? Okay, 12 times 19? Yeah, do you see? Because when you're at school, you learn your times tables up to 12. And then anything after that, it's kind of like, hang on, let me think about it. But when you're in a store and you want to do a quick calculation, because of the habit that you developed over time of learning your times tables that way, you can make quick calculations, and it makes your life easier until it's 12 times 19. Or, 15 times 18. It's just not something that you have in the habit of doing. So a habit is something we do regularly without consciously thinking much about it. It's an automatic mental and behavioral activity. And it can make your life good, like it can help you for the better or for the worse, as I've explained to you. So, 40% of our days are engaged with habits. Habits are created when you have a cue and a reward. So who has developed the habit of checking their phone every couple of minutes? Or checking their phone every time there's a beep or a buzz? And look, and now that's really prominent in society now. This is a really good example of a habit that's been developed because of a cue and a reward. The cue for you is the buzz. The cue for you, and he talks about this in the book, but the cue for you is that ring. So, my wife's the worst. Like, I ignore it, but if my phone beeps, she says, "Who is it?" I don't know. I don't even have the phone with me. Because her cue is so strong, the beep and the buzz, the reward is picking it up and checking the email, and it's usually spam, but checking your email, checking the message you received, and then you get a slight feeling of euphoria. Yeah, it releases a bit of dopamine, you feel good, check it, and then you put it. But don't check it, let it beep, and just let it sit in your pocket, and you start getting a bit, antsy, like, I need to check it. And then it beeps, when you get a message, it beeps you again just to give you another cue. Hello, I got a message for you. You going to check it or not? Yeah? This is a good example of how habits are created. Because if you can identify something that you really want in your life, and you identify the steps that you need to create the habits that you need to do in order to get it, as long as you can find the cue and the reward that are going to make you do those activities, then you won't make the habit. Does that make sense? So, we'll go back to the gym, for example. Like, your cue for the gym might be, 5 p.m, you have an alarm. It rings, I've got to go to the gym. Or you have a friend that you go with, so it's like a buddy. That's your cue. Hello, we've got to go to the gym. Something that is going to notify you that it's time to work out. And then your reward might be, and it could be different for everybody, but this is a really bad one, but your reward could be after you go to the gym, you go to the convenience store and get a Mars bar. Don't laugh, because people do that. Like, they go to the gym, they go, I'm going to reward myself with a shake or a juice. Like, all the wrong things. But your reward could also be the way you're starting to look in the mirror. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter what it is, the cue, there needs to be a cue that triggers that action and then a reward, otherwise you're not going to do it. If you are just going to go to the gym whenever and it's not a routine for you and it's not like something that's instructing you that you need to go, and then you do go and you're not seeing any results, why would you keep going? True? There's no habit created because there's no reward in it for you. There's nothing in it for you. You wouldn't check your phone if it was on silent and it didn't beep and it didn't vibrate. Would you check your phone? No, because there's no cue. And you know that when it beeps or vibrates, your reward is going to be seeing what it is. It's like a present, or spam, if you want to call it that. Okay, so a really good example I can give you of how this has been applied in the corporate world is in the book, he talks about the company Alcoa. They sacked their CEO, they hired a new guy, and all he did was focus on safety. He didn't talk about profits. He didn't talk about how we're going to make more money. He just came in, and the only thing he said was, I don't care about anything. I want 0 accidents. We are going to be 100% all in for safety. And so he instigated the development of habits within the organization that focus primarily on, people looking out for each other, looking out for hazards in the environment that could cause an accident, and looking out for yourself with everything that you did. And anybody who didn't report something that was a hazard, or didn't report, an accident, they got fired. So the Q was, we want no accidents and we want safety for everybody. So, it was basically OH&S. That was the Q. And the reward was you kept your job. Because if you didn't adhere, like you didn't report anything, you got sacked. And what they started to notice was over a period of time, as the incidents fell, the productivity increased, the profits increased. In a nutshell, if you had invested, I think it was $1 million into this company, if you'd invested $1 million into this company, by the 5th year, you'd be earning $1 million in dividends, and your shares would be worth 5 times their value. That's how profitable this company became. All as a result of focusing on OH&S, occupational health and safety, not profits. Does that make sense? So he developed the habits within the organization of people looking out for each other and looking out for incidents that would cause people to get hurt. And as a result, everything else in the company, including the profits, increased. So, I want to give you some examples of companies. So he came in with a whole different ideology. He wanted to change the habits that had been developed in the organization. I'll give you some examples of some companies that have the opposite mindset. No, we've always done it this way, we're not going to change. So that they maintain their philosophies. The Swiss have always been renowned for making the best watches in the world. Okay, they actually invented the digital watch, but to them they couldn't understand a watch is not a watch unless it's got moving parts inside. So, as the Japanese do, they see this at one of the expos that they do, go back and develop the digital watch, and Seiko basically. They didn't invent the digital watch, they just copied what the Swiss had already created, and then they marketed it and became a more popular watch globally than the Swiss watch. That's where the digital watch came from. So, another example, Univac invented the computer. But their philosophy was, this idea that they created was, only smart people, like scientists, should have a computer. What does anybody else need a computer for? So they restricted the whole concept of a computer to scientists. IBM comes along, has a look at what they've done and says, no, this is good for business. So then they basically start implementing it into the business world, take over. And have you heard of Univac? Have you heard of IBM? Okay, that kind of speaks for itself. So when this baby gets warmed up, it can store up to 8 photos. It's the size of a room. But in saying that, IBM had the attitude, well, computers are only for business. And then Apple comes along and says, well, computers should be for personal use. And then you know where that story goes. Right? So it's all philosophy. Charles Carlson invented xerography. So basically he invented a photocopier. Everybody said to him, well, including IBM and Kodak, what do you need that for? We've got carbon paper. But the reality is, when was the last time you saw carbon paper? So they invented it, became Xerox, and obviously multi-million-dollar company that all got rich. And I just want to give you one last example of the power of habits, and why do we do what we do without knowing why we do it. And this is an experiment that they did with monkeys. Essentially, they put 5 monkeys in a room, they put a ladder, they put bananas at the top, and every time a monkey climbed one of the ladders to get the banana, the other monkeys got sprayed with cold water. And it got to a point where every time a monkey climbed up the ladder, the other 4 monkeys would pull the monkey down and then beat him up. And what they did, because it wasn't the monkey climbing the ladder that got wet, it was the group that got wet. So what they ended up doing was, one by one, they would replace the monkeys. So they took one monkey out, put a new monkey, and naturally that new monkey would climb the ladder because the other 4 had learnt their lesson. He climbs the ladder, everyone gets sprayed again, and then they beat him up. And it gets to a point where they're replacing the monkeys, and they're getting beat up when they climb the ladder before the cold water comes. And then they get to another point where all the monkeys are replaced, but none of them climb the ladder, and none of them want to go for the bananas, but none of them know why. They just know you can't climb the ladder, but none of them know why. Kind of like if you've ever been to a circus, you see an elephant standing there, he's just got a rope around his ankle, but it's not tied to anything and it doesn't move. Because when it was a baby, it would be anchored in and, it'd be trying to move, hurt its leg. So it knows that if it's got something tied around its leg, it can't move. It's going to be pain. It's going to equate to pain. The cue is pain. The reward is don't move and it won't hurt. So it develops this habit. So it's very, very powerful what habits can do, especially when you develop the wrong ones. But the hardest thing is trying to identify, look in the mirror and figure out you've got bad habits. And that's kind of like why sometimes having a mentor or someone who's got different perspective on what you're doing can kind of help you, kind of look at what your habits are, what's happening, how can you improve, how can you develop new habits or alter the habits that you have now. So there's 7 simple steps to develop good habits. 1 is identify the habit. And like I said, it's probably a good idea to get a mentor or maybe somebody that is not tied directly to what you're involved in, but can kind of look at what you're doing and how you're doing it and identify some habits that might be keeping you back from achieving the results that you want to achieve. And I guess that's why they have people like business mentors, coaches, stuff like that can kind of give you perspective where, and I suppose any sport, when you look at these elite athletes, it's not, the coach isn't better than them, but the coach can look at what they're doing and give them perspective. Make a decision and then commit to the change. Discover your triggers and obstacles. So if you do have some habits that you're thinking probably aren't that great, maybe look at what triggers those habits and what's causing them, and maybe some obstacles that you have that you might need to get rid of. Devise a plan. Employ visualization and affirmations. I don't know if you've seen some, maybe you know some people, but you watch some of these movies and they've got all these affirmations on the wall. So they're usually good to look at, kind of motivate you. Enlist support from family and friends. Find healthy ways to reward yourself. So again, like, you want to start going to the gym, you can reward yourself after the gym with maybe like a healthy snack, but not necessarily a, like a shake or chocolate, maybe a sugar-free chocolate. But it kind of starts with this timeline. We've spoken about this before, and a lot of people have used this timeline. It's a 5-year timeline because it used to be 10 years, but considering the current generation that you look at, it's kind of like most people can't see past 1 year, let alone looking 10 years ahead. So we talk about a 5-year timeline because at the end of the day, we kind of look at things in terms of a jigsaw puzzle. Your life's got all these different pieces: health, your income, your time, children, etc., etc. And you're trying to fit all these pieces together, but you don't have the picture on the lid of the box. Ever done one of those 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles without the picture on the lid of the box? It's kind of like just jamming pieces together. I haven't done it either, don't worry. So, but just as an example, it's kind of hard to put a jigsaw together if you don't know what it's supposed to look like. And your life with all these different pieces, it's kind of like that as well. You plan a holiday, you spend time, you plan it, you plan a Saturday night out, you sit there, you think about what you're going to do, you call up who you want to invite with you. But most people just don't sit there going, well, I want my life to look like this in 5 years, and this is what I need to do today in order to end up in that position. And that's why most people look back after 5 years, 10 years, and nothing's changed. It's exactly how it was 5 years ago. You're just older, and your kids are older, and everything else is older. So this 5-year timeline is good. If you want to take a photo of that, I'm happy if you do, because I don't know if you can access that. We have a website, but I don't think it's there anymore. If you want to take a photo, that's fine. But it's just a good exercise for you to kind of sit down and get you thinking about where you want to be in 5 years. What do you want to be, have? And it's all going to take, obviously, the development of habits, but it's going to take you thinking about where you are now in terms of where you want to be. If you know where you want to go, and then you know where you're at, then you know what needs to change between now and then in order to help you get to where you want to go. So if you want to be debt-free in 5 years, or you want to be retired in 5 years, or you want to have kids in 5 years, then if you want to have kids, then okay, well, if I want to have a 4-year-old in 5 years from now, I better start soon, right? It's not rocket science. If I want to, be in this position in my work and I need an MBA to get there, then it's going to take 2 years to do the MBA. So I need to enroll this year to start next year. So that 2 years doing the course, then by year 4, and then I've got to apply for that position. Do you know what I mean? But you can't just wake up one day and go, I want to be there, because it just doesn't work like that. Everything, it takes time, and you need to plan ahead and you need to know where you're trying to go. And it's kind of the same, we do a lot of investing and developments and stuff, and I know that if I'm going to have something completed, it's not going to be built next week. I need to acquire the land, then that takes time because the banks are so slow, and then you got to get your plans done, and then you've got to lodge them, and then that takes time, and you realise all these guys take their time. And then you got to get the builder, engage the builder, and then they got to do it, and that's going to take 12 months, and it might take 18 months depending on the project. And then it's by the time all that's done, it's 2.5 years. So you need to know, in 2.5 years, do you have the cash? Do you have the cash flow? Do you have the money? Do you have the site? Blah, blah, blah. So it takes time. And if you wanted to have X amount by then, you can't just have one going. You might need 3 or 4 of them to be in this position in 5 years. Do you see what I'm getting at? So it's a really good exercise to do. And at the end of the day, if you know what the picture is and you have it clear in your mind, it creates a sense of urgency. That sense of urgency gets you into action, because you know what you want, you know what it looks like, you take action on it, you get yourself into gear, and you start taking those daily deliberate steps, which are those habits you develop, so that in 1 year from now, 2 years, 3 years, you're getting closer to where you want to be. And you're not looking back in 5 years going, maybe I should have started, or maybe I should have done something, or maybe, regret is one of those gifts that keeps on giving, and you don't want to be gifted regret. So I highly encourage you, look at your 5-year timeline and think about what you want to be, have.